Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Arunachala Ramanaya Namaskaram. Today I'm going to be talking about verse 23 of Guru Vācaka Kōvai. What the meaning of this verse is, the literal meaning of the verse is those of knowledge who do not know anything as other than themselves, who is the form of complete knowledge, will not declare the world, which does not exist in the view of God, to be the complete reality. This is, in Tamil, this is a very beautifully formed verse because the subject actually, the last half of the verse is the subject. The last line is Ariya Arivina, which literally means those of knowledge who do not know. What do they not know? Andre Ariya. They do not know anything. So what is very subtly implied here is what Bhagavan says in verse 13 of Ulurunapadu. Namely, what he says in verse 13 is, of Ulurunapadu is, Jnanamam Tane Me, oneself who is knowledge or awareness, jnana. In this context, it means awareness in the sense of pure awareness. Oneself who is jnana alone is real. Nanavam jnanam ajnanamam. Awareness which is manifold, or awareness of implies awareness of multiplicity, is ignorance. So knowing many things is not, according to Bhagavan, that is not real knowledge. Likewise, in verse 27 of Upadesha Undiyar, he says that the awareness that is devoid of knowledge and ignorance alone is the real awareness, because there is nothing else to know. That means there's nothing other than oneself to know. I just get that verse because he expresses it very nicely. Oh yeah, he ends by saying, Arivadaku ondruile, there's nothing to know. That implies there's nothing other than oneself to know. So this is what is subtly implied here when he says, those of knowledge who do not know anything. But he then qualifies that further. They do not know anything as other than themselves. And themself here refers to what we actually are, because he clarifies that Tanai is Nirenda Arivuruvam Tanai, which literally means themselves who is the form of complete knowledge or complete awareness. So if we do not know anything other than ourselves as the infinite pure awareness that we actually are, that alone is real knowledge. Likewise, in verse 16 of Upadesha Undiyar, Bhagavan says, Veli Vidyangale Vittu, giving up external vishayas. In other words, giving up knowing phenomena, anything other than oneself, the mind knowing its own form of light alone is real knowledge. Its own form of light means its real nature, which is awareness. Knowing that alone is real knowledge. So the real knowledge is not knowing many things, but knowing the only thing that is real, namely ourself. So anyway, what I read at the start was a literal translation of the verse. Now I'll read my explanatory paraphrase because I clarify what the terms means. That is, those of knowledge. The final word of the verse, arivina, which is the subject, literally means those of knowledge. It's referring here to jnanis, those who are aware of themselves as they actually are. So those of knowledge, namely jnanis, those who are aware of themselves as they actually are, who do not know anything as other than themselves, who is the form of complete knowledge, the complete knowledge that is nirenda arivu. What that implies is the full, all-pervading or infinite awareness. And that is the word nirenda, comes from a verb nire, which means it has a meaning very similar to purna in Sanskrit, which is what is whole, complete, or implying what is the infinite whole, the one infinite reality. So what we actually are is that though he uses the word form, it's not literally a form. It is referring here to Swarupa, what we actually are, which is the infinite knowledge, the full, all-pervading awareness that we actually are. So that's the subject. Those of knowledge, namely jnanis, who do not know anything as other than themselves, who is the form of infinite awareness, will not declare the world, which does not exist in the view of God, to be the complete reality. When he says it does not exist in the view of God, what that implies is it doesn't exist in the view of Brahman, the one infinite being awareness, Satchit, I am, which is the reality underlying the appearance of God as a seemingly separate being. I'll come back to this point later. That is the sense in which Murugan is using the term God here is not in the usual sense of God, but in the sense of Brahman. And so this world doesn't exist in the view of Brahman, and it doesn't exist in the view of jnanis either, because they do not know anything as other than themselves. Not knowing anything as other than oneself means knowing oneself alone. If, for example, if we say that one person sees a rope as a snake, but the other person sees the snake as a rope, what does it actually mean? The person who sees the snake as a rope is actually seeing only the rope, which is what is actually there. So what does it mean to say to see the rope as a snake? Sorry, to see the snake as a rope is what others see as a snake is what the person who knows what it actually is sees as a rope. So one who sees the snake as a rope doesn't see the snake at all. They see only the rope. They recognize what it actually is. It's just a rope. Whereas the person who sees the rope as a snake, what they're actually seeing is just a rope, but in their view, it seems to be a snake. So there's an important distinction between seeing the rope as a snake and seeing the snake as a rope. That is what these terms imply. See, what is actually there is just the rope. So if you see the rope as the snake, you're not seeing it as it actually is. Whereas if you say you're seeing the snake as a rope, what it means is what's actually there is just a rope and you're seeing it as a rope. But you say that they're seeing the snake as a rope. What that implies what others see as a snake, you're seeing as a rope. So for when the jnani, when Bhagavan says here, the jnani does not know anything as other than themselves, that means they know only themselves and nothing but themselves. They don't know all this multiplicity, because knowing multiplicity is ignorance. They know what actually exists as it is, one only without a second. So since this world doesn't exist either in the view of the jnanis or in the view of God, the jnanis will not say it is nirepadu me. They will not say, declare it to be the complete reality. Here, the complete reality, what this term implies is what alone is real, which is the one infinite fullness or complete whole. So they will not say this world is a reality. This is a mere appearance, and it appears only in the view of ego, not in the view of either Brahman or Jnani, because of course the Jnanis are Brahman. What is Brahman? Brahman is Satyam Jnanam Anantam. That is, it's Satyam means what actually exists, Jnanam means the pure awareness, and Anantam means infinite. That is what is said in the Upanishads. That's how Brahman is described in the Upanishads. And as Bhagavan said, the jnana me jnani, jnana alone is the jnani. That is, we see a person Bhagavan, and we say he is a jnani. But that is not his experience. His experience is he is just jnana. Jnana means pure awareness. Jnani means what knows that pure awareness. What knows pure awareness is only pure awareness, because pure awareness can never become an object of awareness. So we can know pure awareness, we can know jnana only by being jnana. As Bhagavan says in Upadesha, Undya verse 26, Tanai iritle tanai aritalam. Being oneself alone is knowing oneself. Because Tani Rendakshadal, because oneself is not two. That is, it's not one thing knowing another thing. We know ourselves just by being ourselves. So we always know ourselves. But now, though we know ourselves, we don't know ourselves as we actually are. Having risen as ego, we don't know ourselves as we actually are, because we know ourselves as I am this body, which is not what we actually are. But what we actually are, always know, which is pure awareness, always knows itself as it actually is, and it knows it just by being it. So that's the implication of this verse. Coming now to Murugan's paraphrase, the meaning of Murugan's paraphrase of this verse is that is for a few hundred verses of Guru Vācaka Kōvai, Murugana wrote what is called a paraphrase. Paraphrase means an explanatory paraphrase. So he wrote it to help people to understand the meaning of the verse, and also to draw out the implication underlying the surface meaning. Likewise, Sadhu Om also wrote paraphrase, but Sadhu Om wrote paraphrase for all the verses, Murugana only for a few hundred. So for this verse, Murugana's paraphrase means those who have real knowledge or awareness, who do not know anything separate or different as other than Atman, their own self, which is paripurna jnana swarupa. Paripurna jnana swarupa is a very difficult, that is a lot of these terms, a lot of the terms in Tamil and Sanskrit are very difficult. We can give the approximate meaning in English, but there's no exact equivalent. For example, the term Swarupa, we usually, sometimes it's translated as the self with a capital S, which is not at all an accurate translation. A better translation of it is real nature. But the literal meaning of Swarupa, Swa means own and Rupa means form. So it means real nature, but real nature in the sense of what that thing actually is. So when Murugana says paripurna jnana swarupamana anmave, he means Atma, which is what we actually are, which is paripurna jnana, complete, infinite and all-pervading awareness. So that is our Swarupa, that is what we actually are. So for the jnani, or one who has real knowledge or real awareness, who does not know anything separate or different as other than themselves, who is paripurna jnana swarupa, will not say or declare the world, which is entirely non-existent in the view of God. I mean, he puts in brackets, abhamma swarupamana, So he's clarifying what is meant by God here is that Atma-swarupa, what we actually are. So Atma-swarupa here refers to means the same as that Paripurna Jnana Swarupa. That which what we actually are is that infinite awareness. So the so the world is entirely non-existent. He puts it very more strongly in his Pariprave than in the verse itself. He says, "Irevan pa'aveil ila dorium ulahi." Iladu orium implies it is entirely non-existent, completely non-existent in the view of God. God in the sense of God as Atma Swarupa. So those jnanis, that the jnanis will not say this world to be the reality. And then he puts in brackets, which is not ever separate from the lakshana. Lakshana here means what is defined as, and he puts that in brackets between paripurna and unmay. Unmay means reality, paripurna means what is full. So the sense is the reality which is not ever separate from what is defined as paripurna. Paripurna means completeness, wholeness, fullness, or infinity. So what is real is is that which is paripurna. Is that it's a very carefully worded. That is, what is the reality? It is that which is always not unseparated. It is not ever separated from that which is defined as paripurna. In other words, the reality is that which is paripurna, completeness, wholeness, fullness, or infinity. So this world, they will not say this world is the reality. So that is the implication. I'll just read once more to connect it all together. Those who have real awareness, who do not know anything separate or different as other than Atman, their own self, which is paripurna jnana swarupa, that whose very nature is complete, infinite, and all-pervading awareness, will not say or declare the world which is entirely non-existent in the view of God, who is that Atma Swarupa, to be the reality, which is not ever separate from what is defined as paripurna, the infinite whole. In this case, Sadhu Om's Paripraya is quite similar. Sometimes Sadhu Om expands it even more, but in this particular case, it's quite similar to Murugan's. What Sadhu Om says is jnanis who know, except oneself, the paripurna form of awareness, no other thing at all exists. That is what the jnanis know is, except oneself, the paripurna form of awareness, no other thing at all exists, will not declare this world appearance, which is non-existent in the view of Swarupa, one's own real nature, which is Paramatman, to be a real substance, that which is complete, full, all-pervading, or infinite. Again, he uses the term, here in one place he, he uses the word paripurna when referring to the awareness, the oneself who is the paripurna form of awareness. Here, towards the end, he uses the same Tamil verb that is used in the verse, Tamil word, Nirevulado me porolaha. So they will not declare it to be a real substance, that which is complete, that which is infinite, that which is whole. And then Sadhu Om gives an interesting explanation here. which is there's a very significant point here. What he says is, this verse begins with the phrase, Irevanadu drishtiile illa ulahe. That means the world which does not exist in the view of Irevan, in which Irevan is a term that usually refers to God, the Lord of this world. But as Bhagavan often explained, the soul, world, and God always seem to coexist in Maya. So the world does seem to exist in the view of its Lord God. Therefore, on seeing this verse, he remarked, who said the world does not exist in God's view? But when Murugan explained that he'd used the term Irevan in the sense of Brahman, Bhagavan accepted this meaning and approved the verse. So it's important to understand, when it's said here the world doesn't exist in the view of God, it doesn't exist in the view of God in the sense of Brahman. But in the view of God as God, yes, the world does seem to exist. So that's an important distinction. Because as Bhagavan says, for example, in the 7th paragraph of Nana, what Bhagavan says is, Yatartamai ulludu Atma-sarupa mondre. What actually exists is only Atma-sarupa. Atma-sarupa means what we actually are. The real nature of oneself, or ourself as we actually are. So that alone is what actually exists. And then he goes on to say, the world, soul, and God are karpanegal in it. Karpanegal is a plural Tamil noun, which is a Tamil form of the Sanskrit word karpana, which means what is fabricated, what is not real. So this world is often said to be manokarpana. It's just a mental fabrication. So the world, soul, and God are fabrications in it, like the silver in a shell. If you see silver in a shell, it's not really silver. It's just the mother of pearl, the nacre that is that coats the shell, but gives it the appearance of silver. But it's not real silver, so it's not at all real. Likewise, this world, soul, and God, as three separate entities, are not at all real. They're mere fabrication. And then he goes on to say, these three appear simultaneously and disappear simultaneously. So long as we seem to be the soul, in other words, so long as we rise as ego, the world seems to be real and God seems to be real. But all these three things partake of the same level of reality. When we investigate ourselves and find we, the soul, are not real as soul, but are real as Swarupa, then it'll be seen that Swarupa alone exists. So then he concludes this by saying, Swarupa alone is the world. Swarupa alone is I, meaning ego or the soul. Swarupa alone is God. Everything is Shiva Swarupa. So when he says Swarupa alone is the world, what he means is Swarupa is what appears as the world. Swarupa is what appears as ego. Swarupa what appears as God. Not that Swarupa is actually the world, or Swarupa is actually ego, or Swarupa is actually God. All these things are nothing but Swarupa. Swarupa is what appears as them. For example, if we can say the snake is a rope, but the rope is not a snake. But here Bhagavan seems to be saying that the rope, namely Swarupa, is the world, is I, is God. So what he means is, though the rope is not a snake, it is what appears as the snake. So it's important to understand that distinction. So what he implies here when he says Swarupa alone is the world, Swarupa alone is I, Swarupa alone is God, he means Swarupa alone is what appears as all these things. But though, in whose view does it all appear? It appears only in the view of ego. But the world and God seem to exist as separate entities. That's why he says in verse 26 of Ulunabdu, when ego comes in, if ego comes into existence, everything comes into existence. If ego is not, everything is not. Because everything, meaning the world and God, all exist only in the view of ego. So the truth is, Swarupa alone exists. Yatatmai uludu Atma-swarupa Andre. What actually exists is only Atma-swarupa. But so long as we rise as ego, we see this one infinite Swarupa as the myriad objects of this world and as the power beyond this world, which is regulating everything, controlling everything, namely God. So Swarupa alone is the world, Swarupa alone is I, Swarupa alone is God. Everything is Shiva Swarupa. So Bhagavan's verdict is that Swarupa alone is what actually exists. But so long as we rise as ego, there's a seemingly real world and a seemingly real God. God here means God, the reality of God is Swarupa. But so long as we rise as ego, we see God as if he's a separate God. But the truth is that God who seems to be separate is actually nothing but Swarupa. As Bhagavan says in verse 24 of Upadesha Undiyar, Irkum Ikayal Isa Jivagal Oruporleava Undipara Upadi Unave Verundipara. What that means is, by being nature, God and soul are just one substance. So what God is the very that is the in their essential being, the soul and God are just one. They're just one being, that one substance, one portal that he talks about there. That is the pure being that we actually are. That pure being is both God and the soul. But why do they seem different? He says in the final line, Upadi unavu veru. Upadi unavu means the awareness of adjuncts. Adjuncts means the, well, upadi is often translated as adjunct, but again, it's not really an adequate translation because upadi means, it's got a range of meanings. It includes a limitation, one sense of it. So often upadi is translated as a limiting adjunct. But essentially what upadi means is, if one thing is mistaken to be another thing, that other thing is an upadi. So we mistake ourselves to be this person, this body, these five sheaths that may constitute this body. They are an upadi, a limiting adjunct. But so long as we experience ourselves as this set of adjuncts called this body or this person, we seem to be separate. And therefore, since we seem to be separate, God seems to be separate. But actually, God is nothing but our own being. God, both we and God, in our essential nature, are just Swarupa. So, as God, God knows the world as a separate entity, because he's the Lord of the world. He obviously has to know the world. How can he govern the world and take care of everything in this world if he did not know it? But in the reality of God is the reality of ourself, which is Atma-swarupa, which is pure awareness, in the view of which no such thing as world exists at all. So it's a very subtle but important distinction. I hope that explanation was clear to everyone. It got a little bit involved, but um, these verses, that is, Bhagavan often spoke in a uh, very compact, almost sutra-like manner. And Murugan was a master of capturing in verse the essence of what Bhagavan was saying. So these verses have very, very deep meaning. So though we can read them superficially, if we go deep into them, there's so much deep implication in these verses. So does anyone have any question about any of the explanations I've given?
Yes, Rati, would you like to ask Michael a question
Yes,
about the verse? Yeah.
yes, Michael. It's interesting that Bhagwan asked Muruganar to clarify Iravanar as Brahman, or what he meant by God, and then when Muruganar clarified that he meant Brahman, and
Yeah,
then he accepted his explanation,
yeah.
right? And so, getting back to our view, it's only in our view, of course, as you rightly explained, that all the world and everything seems to exist. But then I just want to hear clarification that it's only in our view again that creation, sustenance, dissolution, avarana, that's veiling, and grace, anugraha, they all exist only in our view. But in God's view, God only exists as pure being or Atma-swarupa. And it's only in our view because we exist as jiva or as a soul, or and as an upadhi, we have the upadhi, the defect or the limitation. So we perceive all the differences, the multiplicity, and all of that. But really, if we were really to subside and then we were to be God, to know ourselves as God, then we would not have any of these distinctions. And again, in this verse, there seems to be the fact that Bhagwan wanted that clarification from Muruganar. I like actually what's a porul, or whatever you call it, of a
Pari.
puri mural murai of a Sadhu Om better than the one of Muruganar. Muruganar explains well, but again, I wanted one more. It's a bit slightly. It raises this question which creates a little confusion. So Brahman does refer to everything, right? Everything meaning
No,
the soul. No,
Brahman is
does
not everything.
Brahman is only Atma Swarupa.
Brahman is the only thing.
Okay, the only
Everything is Brahman, but we can't say Brahman is what appears as everything. So that's the
okay.
sense in which Bhagavan says Swarupa alone is God, is the world, Swarupa alone is I, Swarupa alone is God. That's why I said what he means by that is not that Swarupa is actually these things, but that Swarupa is what appears as these things.
Oh,
So Brahman is what appears as the world. But
okay.
it is not the world. Brahman is just because the world is consists of many, many things. Brahman is one.
Hmm.
Brahman and Swarupa are one and the same. In Murugan's Pariparai, he that's why he clarifies. He says, Avarma Swarupamana Irevan. He puts in brackets Avarma Swarupamana. That is God. Who is that Atma Swarupa? So that is the sense that in which he's using the word Irevan here.
So the paripurana that talking about is really the Atma Swarupa,
Yes.
is not the all the rest of it which we perceive as ajnanis, right?
All this multiplicity that we perceive is nothing but the one paripurna vastu that we
Yes, yes,
actually are.
yes, yes, yes.
But what you were saying earlier, the important thing is when we use the word God, we're using the word God in a relative sense. So, in the sense of Jagajiva Vishwara, we got the three things the world, the soul, and God. These are all on the same level of reality. When, when what Bhagavan meant is not that the world does not exist in the view of God, but it does not exist in the view of Brahman, which is the reality of God, what God actually is. and what we actually are, and what the world actually is. So it's an important point to understand. When we talk about God, we are referring to God as a seemingly separate entity. That what Bhagavan describes in the 13th paragraph of Nana as Oru Parameshwara Shakti, the one supreme ruling power that is driving all karyas. That is God. And that definitely, if it's driving all karyas, it's not driving them blindly, it knows what it's doing. So in that sense, God does know this world. But the reality, what God actually is, which is the pure awareness that we actually are, that in the view of that, there is no world.
Mhm.
So we need to distinguish God as he really is, in other words, Nirguna Brahman, and God as he appears to be, which is what is called Saguna Brahman.
Mm.
Nirguna Brahman and Saguna Brahman are one and the same thing. There aren't two Brahmans, but what Brahman actually is Nirguna. Uh, Saguna Brahman is Brahman as it appears to be in our view, which is God.
Mhm.
The one Parameshwara Shakti that is driving all karyas, that is governing this world, allotting the fruits of our karmas.
So what Morganer is really explained to Bhagwan is I do see Iravana as the Nirguna Brahman,
No,
Nirguna Brahman.
what Murugan wasn't explaining to Bhagavan. That is, I don't know. We don't know because this is poetry. So, if this is not the exact words Bhagavan would have used. So, Bhagavan may have used the term Swarupa. He may have used the term Brahman because they both mean the same.
Mhm.
But for poetic reasons, Murugan used the word Irevan.
Iravana.
So Bhagavan challenged him. Who said the world doesn't exist in the view of God? Then Murugan said he was using it even in the sense of Brahman. And then
Yeah,
Bhagavan said, okay, then that's correct.
yeah,
So,
that's correct. Yeah.
but that's why the paraphrase are important. That is, Murugan unfortunately wrote a paraphrase in this, in which he very clearly clarified what was meant here by Irevan is Atma-vichara, not God as a separate entity, but God as our own reality.
Yes, yes, yes. That's perfectly clear. Thank you very much,
Right, right, right.
Namo Ramanaya.
More.
Thank you.
Tony, did you want to ask a question? Tony?
Yeah, sorry. Hi, Michael.
Hi.
It's more of going back to basics for me, and it has arisen from the verses. The word Maya, um, for me, well, for all of us, seems to have lots of meanings. So you could say it's seeing the rope as a snake, or it's the confusion of seeing the world or God or our body and so on as real. That's how I explain it to myself. But it's a word, even after all these years, I seem to get stuck on, if that makes sense. I can't get round it and move on. So I
Well,
just make sure you're happy with what I said.
you're not alone. The one thing that can never be explained is Maya.
Hmm.
That is why Maya is said to be anivachanaya. It's inexpressible because what the etymological meaning of Maya, Yama Samaya, that is, Yama means she who is not. So Maya is she who is not. She, because generally power is associated with feminine, like Shiva and Shakti. Shiva is God, his power is Shakti. But of course, Shiva and Shakti are one and the same. God and his power are not two different things. They're one and the same, but the power aspect of God is generally personified in female form. So that's associated with all the iconography and everything in Hinduism. So Shakti is usually considered as female, and so Maya means she who is not. So Maya does not exist.
Hmm.
But uh, Maya seems to exist because we've risen as ego. Bhagavan often in Guru Vācaka Kōvai we come across a term, mana maya, mind maya. And some places it's clarified by Murugan or Sadhu Om, maya, which is the mind. That is, there's no maya other than the mind, particularly in the mind sense of ego, because maya is said to have two powers, the avarana shakti and vikshepa shakti. Avarana shakti is the veiling power. Vikshepa is the dissipating power. So what is the nature of ego? As ego, we're always aware of ourselves as I am this body. That is what veils, that is the avarana shakti, that is what veils us. We don't, though we're always aware that we don't know what we are because we mistake ourselves to be something other than what we actually are. So that is the veiling. And having mistaken ourselves to be this body, we then experience all this multiplicity. That experience of multiplicity is the Vikshepa Shakti. So Maya is nothing but ego or mind. And if it seems to be real, so long as we rise as ego, but if we investigate ourselves, that is, we seem to be ego only so long as we're attending to things other than ourselves. If we turn our attention back within to find this ego, as Bhagavan says in verse 25 of Ulunapadu, Tedinal otum pidicum, if sought, it takes flight. Nobody has ever seen this ego. Because if we look for it, there's no such thing to be found. If we withdraw our attention from all other things by focusing entirely on ourselves, what do we see ourselves to be? Satchit, pure being awareness. So we seem to be ego only so long as we're not attending to ourselves. That's why Bhagavan often said, people ask, why did ego rise? Or why is there Maya? Or why all this? Bhagavan used to say it's because of avichara. Avichara means non-investigation. That means because we are not attending to ourselves, all this seems to be here. All we have to do is to attend to ourselves exclusively, attend to ourselves so keenly that we cease to be aware of any of these appearances, then we will be aware of ourselves as pure awareness. And as soon as we are aware of ourselves as pure awareness, ego is thereby destroyed, because knowing ourselves as pure awareness, that is the real awareness. That is what we actually are. And when we know ourselves as we actually are, we can never mistake ourselves to be anything else. Once you've seen the rope as a rope, you can no longer mistake it to be a snake. So all we have to do, that's why Bhagavan said it's so ayayati sulapum, anma videi ayayati sulapum. That is knowing oneself extremely easy. Extremely easy. Why it seems difficult for us is because we're still attached to all this experience of multiplicity. We still have such strong Vishaya vasanas, such strong inclination to experience ourselves as all this multiplicity. So we complain, oh, it's so difficult to turn within and know myself. Yes, it seems to be so because we don't want it. If you're standing on the edge of a cliff, the easiest thing in the world is just to take one step forward. But will we be able to do it? No. This is one thing we cannot do because we're so attached to our life in this body. If we step forward, we're going to fall down and become a nasty mess at the bottom. So though it's very easy, it seems to us very difficult. Likewise with this. Turning our attention within and knowing ourselves as we actually are is extremely easy. If we haven't yet done so, it's because we don't yet have that all-consuming love to surrender ourselves completely. That's why Bhagavan said, Bhakti is the mother of jnana. We must have wholehearted, all-consuming love to surrender ourselves completely. Then only will we find how easy it is to know ourselves as we actually are.
I think I've got this habit of trying to chisel away at my logical brain, trying to distill everything so I can compartmentalize it. But obviously, I don't want to distill it and lose the essence of the whole thing.
But the problem is actually the essential teachings of Bhagavan are very logical and rational and based on our experience of ourselves. But the mind has a tendency to complicate things. If we really understand Bhagavan's teaching, they're extremely simple.
Yeah.
So why do we have to repeat it to ourselves again and again? Why are we having these Zoom meetings? Why are we talking about these things? Because though it's extremely simple, we are very, very reluctant to understand it in all its naked simplicity. We want to complicate it because the mind thrives on complication, on complexity. Is the food on which the mind, the state of absolute simplicity is the state of one without a second. That is what self-attentiveness is. In self-attentiveness, there are not two things, one thing attending to another thing. There's just one thing attending to itself. So there's no multiplicity there. But we have no taste for that oneness. We still have so much taste, so much liking for all this multiplicity.
Oh, yes.
So it's, why are we still in bondage? It's entirely our own fault. It's our choice.
Thank you, Michael. It's my fault. No, that was brilliant. Thank you. I needed that very much. Thank you.
Yeah, right.
There was just one thing which I was remembering. In in the Vedas and then even in the early Upanishads, it's a bit different, but the idea of Maya, sort of from Ma, it's really to measure. It's a meaning which changes as you sort of you go beyond the Upanishads, this thing of illusion. It really happens after the Buddhists, who are heavily into this thing of the rope and the snake and the dream and the illusion, the magician's trick and all this kind of thing. And it's really very interesting because there seems to be no need to contemplate, to think of a sort of like a reality and an illusion. That sort of a distinction doesn't seem to be present, which is not to say that there isn't a search for truth to what you really are, but I guess it's sort of expressed or thought about differently because it's a different kind of a paradigm, maybe. It's a very different way of living and so on. Yeah, it was just an interesting thought because for some people, maybe that works better or not. I don't know.
But
anyway,
it's not just Buddhist because it's there in the Upanishads.
But not as illusion, because I think it's from the what is it called? The Shweta Vastara, whatever it's called. It's more like a creative power. The idea of Maya as illusion is something quite different, because Shankaracharya, of course, depends heavily on Yogacara and Madhyamika, because they're all part and parcel of the same group. I mean, it was, and the early Buddhism is very sort of tied in, and the Jainism with, the Veda. I mean, you simply cannot separate them. It's part of like a common episteme, and then they have their sort of discussions, and they're not really distinct initially, and then whatever it goes on, and then it was just but I think it's not so much that there is that there is some kind of a gap between the former and the later, but I think sort of when one sort of when one inhabits a very different kind of world, the sort of ways of thinking, the ways of practicing and so on can be a little bit different, because it may not make sense to think like that. You see, because for us, we live in a very kind of concretized, I don't know what world full of this thing. What is it, like Inception? Dreams within dreams within dreams, and a lot of cultures have this thing of dreaming. What is it, the Aboriginal and so on? Dream time, and there's a lot of all these kinds of things. But the movement to this notion of illusion, perhaps, is or delusion, illusion, whatever. It I think emerges slowly as a different way of looking at perhaps the same thing. Maybe. Anyway, that's just.
It may not be there so explicitly in the Upanishads, but the seeds of it are definitely there. And
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
what Shankara brought out so masterfully in his in his Bhashyas on the Upanishads is what is the implied meaning there? Of
Yeah.
course, others disagree, but there's always room for the same words being interpreted in different ways.
Yeah, spider
We
weaving a
interpret
thread.
things according to our taste and
Yes, and Shankara, his teacher, I mean, there were a lot of influences, ways of interpreting, which had emerged by then, I think, with Gaudapada and all of them. That were just, there's a huge mishmash across Indian culture, traditions. I
because there's
think,
so many philosophers and each are feeding on each other and so much
yes,
in exchange
which
of
is very
ideas and
important, which is very, very important because, there is a uniqueness to life. I mean, there's a huge multiplicity of people, multiplicity of perspectives in India,
yeah,
and yet they all lead to the same truth,
yeah,
that's sort of the oldest saying. And I think that's something which is somewhat unique and to be really sort of attended to and given
yeah,
respect, because I think that's one of the distinctions which at least I've it's something which has stayed with me. I may not be interested in anything else, but that particular aspect has always,
yeah, yeah.
and they're not from being taught. It's almost like it's something which is in the air that that one can accept all the
Yeah.
different things as
Yeah.
modes. Anyway, let's
That
see what else.
that is the real richness of Indian culture and Indian
Yes,
philosophy um, is that the scope it gives for multiple different views.
yes, exactly.
And what is
By the way,
philosophy? It is darshana. It's different ways
exactly.
of viewing the same thing.
Exactly, perspectives. So there's something in the talk saying, I'm not sure who has written this, that by the way, Gautam Buddha himself was born a Hindu, so all of it comes to the Upanishads and Vedas. I think one has to be very, very careful. There were no Hindus until the various colonialisms, including the Mughals, right? The word Hindu itself was a term used by various people who came from the west of India to designate all that belonged culturally or geographically. And then later on, the concept of religion came in with the Abrahamics. So, I think we have to give the soil its due, that it had its own perspectives, its ways of looking, in which many different perspectives thrived on the same ground,
Yeah.
and not try to reduce one to the other, because that I think comes in really with the various colonizations, internal or external, that you want to subsume one under another. But why? We can attend to others, we can listen to people. This is very important.
But
Pluralism.
it's
Yeah,
all one pluralistic culture, whether
exactly.
Buddhist or Jain or
Yes, exactly. And I think,
Vedic or
yeah,
whatever.
exactly. And they need to be accorded respect. And they're not even that distinct in a way, but
Yes.
they're not also reducible. That's the nature of life, that there is
Yeah, yeah.
distinction and it's not reducible. Anyway, let's get on to something else. There is, are there any other questions on the verses?
Murti has his hand up.
Oh, okay. Murti, would you like to ask a question on the verses? Murti?
Yeah, Michael, namaste.
Namaste.
Uh, yeah, actually, going back to verse 23, in view of the ego, soul or I as an individual, God and world are unreal or not real and separate.
Well, they are real. In the view of ego, they're real. Ultimately,
view
they're
of-
unreal, but they appear
Only
from the perspective of ego, they appear real.
Right. In the view of ego, they are real. They're seemingly real.
Seemingly.
But actually unreal.
Yes.
Earlier, you also said the soul and God are the same as the Swarupa.
Yes.
Or actually,
actually, yes.
Yeah, the same as the Swarupa. Can we say I, God, and the world as well are actually Swarupa.
Yeah, that's what Bhagavan says in the 7th paragraph.
Yeah.
Swarupa alone is the world, Swarupa alone is I, Swarupa alone is God. It's Swarupa that appears as all this, the one Swarupa appears as this multiplicity. But it appears only in the view of ego. That's the important point.
So I, God, and world are not real apart from the pure consciousness. Can one put it that way?
Yes, nothing is other than that pure consciousness. Yatatmai uludu Atma-swarupa mondre. What actually exists is only Atma-swarupa. World, soul, and God are just karpanigal.
Yeah, I mean, the question arises because when we say a jnani does not consider the world to be real, in general, it gives an impression that the world is unreal. Okay, but would it be right? Yeah, that's why this. I'm seeking the clarification that the world is unreal when considered apart from Swarupa. The world.
So long as we see a world, it seems to be something other than Swarupa. It seems to be something other than ourself. So long as we experience multiplicity, that multiplicity is unreal because the multiplicity exists only in the view of ego.
Does a jnani see the world? He does see the world, but without multiplicity.
No. Well, seeing the world without multiplicity means what? The jnani sees only jnana.
Yeah, but
it's that one jnana that we see as the world. What we see as the world is what the jnani sees as Swarupa.
Right.
That doesn't mean the jnani is seeing the world. If someone sees the snake as a rope, that means they're not seeing the snake at all. They're seeing only a rope. But what others are seeing as a snake, they are seeing as a rope.
Yeah, what we see, as you said.
People often have understand when they said the jnani sees the world as Swarupa, as self. People often have a very superficial understanding of that. They imagine the jnani is going around seeing the world, but seeing it all as Swarupa is one, undivided. That Bhagavan describes beautifully in verse 28 of Upadesha Undiyar. When one knows the real nature of oneself, then Anadi, Ananta, Akhanda Satchidananda. It's unbroken, it's undivided. So what we actually are is one undivided infinite whole. So if we see this one undivided infinite whole as this world of multiplicity, as a separate God who is controlling it all, and as ourself a separate seer who's seeing it all, that is all Nanavam Jnanam Ajnanamam, as Bhagavan says in verse 13 of Uladvanapadu.
One undivided infinite whole in spite of the multiplicity.
In spite of the appearance of multiplicity. But that appearance of multiplicity is only in the view of ego. In the view of jnana, there is no multiplicity. There is only oneness.
Yeah, thank you, Michael.
Right.
I just want to, can I ask, in the case of Ramakrishna Paramahansa,
yes.
I mean, very clearly, it is documented that he prayed to Shakti,
Yes.
Kali. Now, Kali is, and his, if I'm not mistaken, his means of realization, or he is shown that you can reach God or Swarupa through Shakti.
Yes.
Shakti in this case is God as in the view of ego.
Yes, that is, in the early stages, Ramakrishna had so much love for Kali. He was talking with her. She was as real to him, or even more real to him than this world. That was his experience. But what did that Kali do? In order to give him the final experience, she brought Totapuri. Totapuri may not have been, that is, I think, almost certainly Ramakrishna is a far more elevated soul than Totapuri. But Totapuri was a necessary catalyst to, and so when Totapuri wanted to teach Ramakrishna, whatever he wanted to teach Ramakrishna, he said, I have to go and ask my mother first. And Totapuri thought, what sort of a man is this? He has to go and ask his mother. He didn't understand at first, but what he meant by his mother, he had to go and ask Kali. So he went and asked Kali, and she said, yes, I have brought him here. Learn from him. And then, but I'm not even sure, but Totapuri was even a jnani, but he knew whatever directions he gave to Ramakrishna produced this effect of turning his attention back to himself. And then he realized Kali is not something separate. Kali is his own being. Kali is, that is, he is not something separate from her. But of course, he continued worshipping. Outwardly, he continued worshipping her as mother, but inwardly, he had the experience that Kali, that he is nothing other than Kali. Kali alone is what actually exists. Kali is nothing but what Bhagavan refers to in the 7th paragraph of Nana as Atma-vichara.
So Kali is not a projection of God as an appearance in.
We can see Kali as an external form, so we can see Kali as God. But what is the reality? Irukam ekayal isa jivagal oru porleava. That is, in their being nature, God and soul are one portal, one vastu, one substance. That substance is pure being. That is what Kali actually is. But she appears outwardly in a form. But she wanted Ramakrishna to know her Swarupa, what she actually is. And in order to know her Swarupa, he has to know his Swarupa, because his Swarupa is nothing but her Swarupa. So she brought Totapuri there in order to bring about this crucial change.
But in the same, just extending this in the view of ego, soul, God, and world. God here, I mean, which has an external form, is essentially a part of the being or the being itself. In general, I mean, whether Kali or not, I mean, because there are so many who worship.
The essence of God, what God actually is nothing but Satchit, the pure being awareness. But so long as we experience ourselves as ego, we experience the appearance of a separate world, and God seems to us to be something separate from ourselves. Because we have limited ourselves, our unlimited reality appears to us as a separate being whom we refer to as God. Arunachala, Kali, Shiva, Krishna, Rama, whatever we call it, Allah, doesn't matter, you can use any name. But that's all nothing but our own one infinite reality. But it seems separate, so where the separation begins is with our rising as ego. Because by rising as ego, we limit ourselves and thereby seemingly separate ourselves. But we are never separate from that. The truth is we are never separate from that, but we seem to be. The whole problem is a seeming problem. There's no problem at all. But there's a seeming problem which seems very, very real and seems to bind us very, very tightly. But it is not binding us. It's not, we are holding on to it. That's why we seem to be bound by it.
Thank you, Michael. Thanks.
Right.
So the question is, or it's a comment. So does ego also project Bhagwan in order to call us back within by grace? This means it will be the end of ego, so it's going against its own nature to project the Guru.
There's a verse in Guru Vācaka Kōvai, I can't remember where in which Bhagavan says, everything that's seen outside is a projection of what is already within. So this entire world of names and forms is a projection of our own vasanas. The name and form of Bhagavan is a projection. The name and form of Bhagavan is a projection. But what is shining through that projection is our own Swarupa. So what Bhagavan, outward appearances, he's just a person like any other person. Okay, he may be a special person, but he seems to be a human being, a human form, a body that was born at one time and died at another time. He seems to have all the limitations of a human being. But what the difference between that human form and all these other human forms is that what we see shining through each human form is an ego with its own vasanas and likes and dislikes and different views of the world and so on and so forth. Whereas what we see shining through the name and form of Bhagavan is our own Swarupa, our own reality. So that is why Bhagavan used this analogy. It's actually it's there in older Tamil literature of the I think it occurs in a text called Orival Odicum, the analogy of the lion seen by an elephant in its dream. The belief is that elephants are not afraid of anything except lions. So if an elephant dreams of a lion, the shock of seeing a lion will cause it to wake up. So it is what Bhagavan said and what is said there in Orival Odicum, the outward form of a guru is like the lion seen in the dream of an elephant. The lion is unreal, but it brings about a real awakening. Likewise, the name and form of a guru is unreal, but it brings about the real awakening. Why it brings about the real awakening? Because what is shining through, if we look at the eyes of Bhagavan, if we read the stories about Bhagavan, if we read the teachings of Bhagavan, we see the clarity and the love. That clarity and love is nothing but our own real nature. So it's our own Swarupa that is shining through the eyes of Bhagavan, that is shining through the words of Bhagavan, that is shining through every action of Bhagavan. That is why we are all attracted to Bhagavan. Why even people who are not at all attracted to his teachings, they still love Bhagavan. They happily ignore his teachings or pay lip service to them, but they just love Bhagavan. Why do we love Bhagavan? Because we see in him our own self. What we actually are, our own Swarupa, we see in Bhagavan. But though we see him, though we're attracted to Bhagavan because we see in him our own self, we are seeing him through colored glasses. Because we mistake ourselves to be the name and form of a body, we mistake him to be the name and form of a body. And if we have strong vasanas with strong likes and dislikes, Bhagavan himself said, the outward form of Vijnani is like a mirror. Whatever comes before it appears in it. So everyone, this is why there are so many different views of Bhagavan. I remember when I first came to Tiruvannamalai in 1975, that was only, no, sorry, 76 it was. It was only just 26 years after Bhagavan left the body. So there were still many devotees who had lived with Bhagavan for years. And you would hear stories from one devotee. And if you mention that story to another devotee, they'll say, no, 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 it wasn't like that. It was like this. I was there. I saw it like this. So the people who were there at the same time, they had quite different views of what Bhagavan did, the significance of what he did, of the meaning of what he said. So many different views were there because we're all, Bhagavan is, as he said, he's just like a clear mirror. So we see in him a reflection of ourselves. We see in him a reflection of our own reality, our own Swarupa, which is what attracts us to him. But we also see in him a reflection of all our own likes and dislikes and beliefs and so on. So if we want to know who are the devotees who understood Bhagavan better, the purer the mind, the more clearly we will see Bhagavan as he actually is. But nobody knows Bhagavan as he actually is so long as they rise as ego. To know Bhagavan as he actually is, we need to be Bhagavan. And now, be Bhagavan means not to be the out form of Bhagavan, but to be what Bhagavan actually is, which is Swarupa, pure Satchit. So we can know Bhagavan only by losing ourselves completely in him. Then only we know him as he actually is. We can know him only by being him. He alone knows himself as he actually is.
Michael?
Yes?
Thank you for that. I'm wondering, is it our egos which are projecting this form of the guru in the first place to remind us to come back within? Is ego actually projecting this?
Well, as I said, as Bhagavan clarified, what all the names and forms of this world are a projection of our vasanas. Bhagavan compared the vasanas to the film reel in a projector. So it's the vasanas that are projected as this world.
So it's
So
also
the form of Bhagavan is a projection of our vasanas. But Bhagavan is not just a random form. That is our own real nature, out of its immense love for us, appeared outwardly in that form in order to turn us within. So when we talk about Bhagavan, we're not just talking about the person that he seemed to be, or we shouldn't be just talking about the person we seem to be. What is the reality? We see Bhagavan as a person, as a body. Does Bhagavan see himself as a body? There's a verse in Uludunapadu Anubandham in which he says the jnani is like a person sleeping in a cart. In a bullock cart, if a person is sleeping in the bullock cart, they don't know whether the cart is moving or whether it's standing still or whether it's standing unyoked, unyoked from a bull, because they're asleep, so they're not aware of it at all. Likewise, the jnani is not aware of the activity or the inactivity or the nishta, or sometimes Bhagavan seems to be completely absorbed in himself. Sometimes he seems to be active, talking to people, cutting vegetables, writing poetry, all these things. So, but for Bhagavan, none of these, he's not at all aware of what Bhagavan actually is only that pure awareness. But that pure awareness appeared in the form of Bhagavan to give us these teachings in order to turn us within.
So our own true nature is showing us Bhagavan.
Yes, our own true nature appeared in the form of Ramana Maharshi in order to turn us back within.
But that's different to ego projecting a world, or is that just like a subsection of ego projecting this world
That
as
is
a safety net?
the outer shell, the form in which Bhagavan appeared. That is a projection of our vasanas. But remember, vasanas, we don't have control over what we project. Though all this is our dream, we can't suddenly decide that Washington is just 2 miles from Moscow or something like that. No, Washington is that side of the Atlantic. Moscow is this side of the Atlantic. The world appears in a certain form. We have no, though this is all our creation, we have no control over this creation, because in a dream, we don't experience ourselves as the creator of the dream. We experience ourselves as a creature within the dream. In other words, we experience ourselves as a person within the dream. As a person within the dream, we have no control over the content of the dream. So there is a power that controls this projecting. We can put it in to use the analogy Bhagavan used, there's a power that selects which film reel should be put in the projector at which time. The film reel is just like the prarabdha. So that the film on that reel has been carefully edited. It's all the fruit of our past actions, but the fruit of our past actions selected by Bhagavan and put together to form the prarabdha of our life. Part of our prarabdha is the appearance of Bhagavan in our life.
Okay, so it's almost like a safety net for us. It's almost like there's a safety net that no matter how far out we go, believing in this external world and grasping everything ego throws our way, there is this our own true nature, which our prarabdha will show us the way back.
Exactly. And the truth is, we are always safe, because we are never anything other than that pure being. But we seem to be in danger. So long as we rise as ego, we're very vulnerable. We take this body to be I. See, this body, it's here in one moment, it'll be dead the next moment. We don't know we don't know how long. So there's so many, we're vulnerable in so many ways, because we've limited ourselves. But all that is just a seeming vulnerability. What we actually are is ever safe. So we are never actually separate from Bhagavan. So we are always in very, very good hands. That is, nothing can happen to us without his consent. Whatever difficulties we undergo in life, we all undergo so many difficulties, so many problems, so many different forms of suffering. But none of these things these things are happening because they're allowed by him to happen. And he allows them to happen for our own ultimate spiritual good.
So our prarabdha really is overriding ego, because ego doesn't want us to wake up, because that's the annihilation of ego.
No, the very nature of ego, as Bhagavan says in verse 25 of Uladunaptu, grasping form, it comes into being. Grasping form, it stands. Grasping and feeding on forms, it flourishes abundantly. Leaving form, it grasps form. So the very nature of ego is to grasp all these things. So it is only by the power of grace that we even become willing to begin to try to follow this path.
So that's what I mean by overriding. That's what I mean. The power of grace is like an overriding of ego's malfeasant plan.
Absolutely. That power of grace is nothing but the infinite love that Bhagavan has for us as himself. That is, Bhagavan doesn't see us as the individuals that we see ourselves to be. He sees us as we actually are. He sees us as himself. So he loves us as himself. So that infinite love that he has for us as himself is what we experience as his grace. And that grace alone can save us. As Bhagavan said, grace is the beginning, the middle, and the end. It's grace alone that attracts us to this path. It's grace alone that gives us the love to persevere in following this path. And it is grace alone that will eventually swallow us. And that grace is nothing but Bhagavan himself, who is our own Swarupa.
And so grace is the antidote to ego, basically.
It is what Bhagavan refers to in Arunachala Patikam as the Marandu, the hill of medicine. That is the medicine, is Bhagavan's grace.
Okay. Thank you.
Well, all thanks to Bhagavan. He has, by his infinite grace, he has revealed these things to us and given us some sort of inkling. But we don't, of course, we don't understand this. Who understands grace? Grace is a power which is beyond all human understanding, because grace is the subtlest of all powers, but the greatest of all powers.
But did you say one time that grace, when it's the mind going back within, that grace is still Maya, because the mind going out, Maya takes us outwards to ego, but when it comes back in, is it grace? Did you say that?
There is only one power. So long as we are attracted to this world, that grace is acting in the form of Maya. Sorry, that power is acting in the form of Maya. But that underlying that Maya, that the Maya is like the superficial surface. The underlying power is the power of grace. So that power of grace, which is the real power behind Maya, is what is pulling us back within. So Maya has within itself the seeds of its own destruction, because the reality of Maya is grace.
Yes. Yeah. Okay.
That's why Krishna says in the Gita, Mama Maya, my Maya. It's his power.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. That clarifies.
Ramakrishna talked about Vidya Maya and Avidya Maya. What he referred to as Vidya Maya is Maya in the form of grace. What he called Avidya Maya is grace in the form of Maya, but it's all one and the same.
Okay. Okay.
So, sir, in the Mountain Path, July 1975 issue,
Yes.
it is recorded that once T.N. Krishnaswamy was walking with Bhagwan on the hill. When Bhagwan said to him, I quote, Arunachala is Shiva himself. Just as we identify ourselves with the body, so Shiva has chosen to identify himself with the hill. Arunachala is pure awareness in the form of the hill. It is out of compassion to those who seek him, he has chosen to reveal himself, chosen to reveal himself in the form of a hill, visible to the eye. The seeker will obtain guidance and solace staying near the hill. So this is what Bhagwan told T.N. Krishnaswamy.
Yeah.
My question, sir, is, we may consider Arunachala to be Shiva, but how can Shiva identify itself with Arunachala? Shiva, as it actually is pure awareness, and pure awareness is aware only of itself. If Shiva identifies itself with the hill, that implies that Shiva is aware of something other than itself, in which case Shiva ceases to be Shiva. Could you clarify this, sir?
Right. Okay, I can. But first, I'll just say something. I remember this this passage very well. I'd forgotten that it was in the Mountain Path. It also appeared in a souvenir published sometime in the 1960s, at the time that Bhagavan's the construction over Bhagavan Samadhi was inaugurated, I think. So maybe the Kumbhabhishekam of Bhagavan's shrine. So that mandapam, the four polished granite pillars and the cover over Bhagavan's Samadhi. What T.N. Krishnaswamy wrote this article for that souvenir. And in it he said that he was walking on the hill with Bhagavan one day, And Bhagavan bent down and picked up a stone and said, someone has written from abroad asking for a stone from the most sacred part of the hill. He doesn't know, but the whole hill is sacred. Arunachala, and then the rest of what that you read. Arunachala is Shiva himself. Just as we identify ourselves with the body, so Shiva has chosen to identify himself with the hill, etc. So what is this is a very, very significant thing that Bhagavan said. And Bhagavan, I think also, I don't know that, I mean, I don't know whether he said this at that time, but he often used to say, whereas Kailash is the abode of Shiva, Arunachala is Shiva himself. But your question is about him saying, just as we identify ourselves with the body, so Shiva has chosen to identify himself with the hill. But then the next sentence, Bhagavan says, Arunachala is pure awareness in the form of the hill. So there seems to be a slight contradiction, which you're pointing out there, because if Arunachala is pure awareness, how can it identify itself with the hill? The note that Sadhu Om wrote for this verse I talked about today, namely that when Murugana heard what Bhagavan said and composed this verse and showed it to Bhagavan for his approval, Bhagavan said, who said the world does not exist in the form, in the view of God? And Murugana then clarified what he meant there by God was Brahman. And Bhagavan then approved it. So there's an important distinction between God and Brahman. That is, of course, they're one and the same. But when we talk about Brahman or Swarupa, we're talking about God as he actually is. But there's also, when Bhagavan says world, soul, and God appear simultaneously and disappear simultaneously, he's not talking about Swarupa. He's talking about God as he or she or it appears to be in our view. So when he says Shiva identifies itself with Arunachala, just as we identify ourselves with the body, there he's referring to Shiva as God. As pure awareness, of course, he doesn't identify himself with anything. As pure awareness, he knows only pure awareness. So we have to understand Bhagavan is talking here, as he often does when talking about Arunachala. He's talking at different levels. If we read the verses of Arunachala Stuti Panchagam carefully, we often find in the same verse, Bhagavan's often referring to Arunachala as Chinmayam, that which is composed of awareness, Chit Sarupam. He often uses these terms. He talks about Arunachala shining in the heart, but at the same time he's talking about Arunachala as a hill. So there is seemingly two levels. Arunachala as an external form and as Arunachala as the internal reality. There is no contradiction between these. It's all the difference is in our view. For Bhagavan, they are one and the same. There's no difference, because we see in gross terms. We see, what's shining in my heart as I am, what is out there in the form of the hill. That it seems to us to be different. So we don't fully understand this. But Bhagavan is giving us a clue here to try and understand it. Shiva as God, that is, Shiva as a seemingly separate God, has chosen to identify himself with the hill. So let's try and understand this in different terms. Do we not all consider Bhagavan to be God in human form? God chose to appear in the form of Bhagavan in order to give us these teachings. Do we not all consider that to be the case?
Yes.
So, in our view, it seems that God has chosen to come in the form of Bhagavan, just as God has chosen to identify himself with this hill. There's no difference. But obviously, that is the reality of God is our own being. So our own being, but so long as we limit ourselves so long as we rise as ego, we limit ourselves as a person. So our own unlimited reality seems to be something different from us, separate from us. Of course, we can never be separate from the infinite, because if there were anything other than the infinite wouldn't be infinite. But so long as we rise as ego, we experience a seeming separation. So long as we experience that seeming separation, Arunachala or Bhagavan or Shiva, whatever we call it, it's all one and the same, seems to us to be something separate from ourselves. And it's at that level that Bhagavan says Shiva has chosen to identify himself with this hill. Just like the same Shiva, the same Arunachala Shiva that identifies itself with this hill, also chose to appear in the form of Bhagavan Ramana to give us these teachings. In the form of the hill, it is from ancient times been giving all these teachings in silence. But only a few very mature souls were able to understand that silent teaching. So for the benefit of all of us, the same Shiva that identifies this hill as I chose to appear in the form of Bhagavan Ramana to give us the same teachings in words. Because of our minds being extroverted, we're not able to understand the silent teaching that is ever going on in our own heart. So it's necessary for him to appear externally in the form of Bhagavan in order to turn our attention back within. So when Bhagavan says Shiva has chosen to identify himself with this hill, he's saying that in the same sense, but we consider Bhagavan to have chosen to appear in the form of Bhagavan Ramana in order to give us these teachings.
So,
yes, what he actually is pure awareness, and as pure awareness, there's nothing other than himself, and there's no one to be saved and nothing. But because we have risen as ego, we have got ourselves in a right mess, and in order to save us from this mess in which we've got ourselves, he has appeared in the form of this hill, and he's appeared in the form of Bhagavan Ramana.
So, sir, we can say that Arunachala is Shiva's body. Can we say that?
Yes.
Shiva's body, like
that's
body.
what Bhagavan says. Just like we identify this body as I, Shiva identifies this hill as I.
So just as we worship Bhagwan because there is real Bhagwan inside, similarly we need to worship Arunachala because the real Arunachala resides within.
Exactly. That is, when we see Bhagavan, we see more than just a person. We see the great love and clarity, and we see God shining through Bhagavan. If you look at Bhagavan's eyes, they're just eyes like any other eyes, but there's something extraordinary about those eyes, because there's something shining through those eyes which we can't adequately grasp with our mind. But we know Bhagavan is something extraordinary, something beyond the grasping power of the mind. So that same divine reality that we see in the form of Bhagavan Ramana, he saw in the form of Arunachala.
Wonderful, sir. Thank you, sir. Wonderful.
Right.
Thank you.
Yeah, there's just something which occurred to me when Sanjay was speaking, this idea of choosing or wishing to be identified with the hill and so on. There is a notion in certain forms of Advaita, not necessarily Shankaras, but in others types of Advaita, which this notion of freedom, of swatantrata, will. You know, we often say God's will, and we always say, sort of it'll happen as Bhagwan wishes it. But there might be a kind of a even if that will is sort of, that power is, it creates a world of fiction and so on, a kind of, what we call Maya and so on, in which, and it is in that world of Maya that Shiva identifies with the hill and, whatever we identify with the body and all, and the rest of it. Would this notion of Swatantrata, of that freedom of Brahman, of Paramatma, whatever, would that be at all a useful way of looking at it? That it just happens, it's an illusion, it's illusory, but it is the power of freedom which is there in whatever that reality. It's never other than that reality, but this is there. Yeah.
When the moment we rise as ego, the power of grace starts working to save us from ourselves. So it's all this is the power, the working of the power of grace. Even the working of Maya, as I said, behind the power of Maya, there is grace working. So Maya is like a disguise. The underlying reality is grace. We call it Maya because we still have so much attraction for this world. But ultimately, it is all only, the only power that exists is the power of grace, which is the infinite love that Bhagavan has for us as himself. So when it is said all this is his Leela, that doesn't mean he enjoys playing games and so he's keeping us perpetually in this Maya playing his games. No, because we have risen as ego, he plays this game of grace in order to save us. The sole aim, the sole will of God is to save us. Because Bhagavan doesn't see us as other than himself. So he loves us as himself. And because he is infinite happiness, he loves himself as infinite happiness. So he wants us to be infinitely happy, as we actually are. So that love is what is ultimately behind this. All that we experience in our life is prarabdha, the fruits of our past karmas, selected by grace for our own ultimate salvation. So ultimately, this whole world is grace. All the joys and sorrows of life are grace. All the kindness and that people show for each other, kindness and love for one person for another, or for the kindness that is shown to a stranger, and the wars that are taking place, the terrible tyrants, the people who unnecessarily cause so much suffering to so many people. All this is the pay of grace. Nothing. There's a saying in Tamil that Bhagavan often used to quote, Avan Arulal Andri or Anuvamasayadu, except by his grace, not even an atom moves. So all that we consider good in this world and all that we consider bad, it's all his grace, working for our ultimate salvation.
I'm just sitting here, Michael, in the conservatory. And, if the mind is quiet, as it is with when you're talking, the world is almost blindingly beautiful. You can hardly look at it. You can hardly feel that beauty. Love is what we're made up of, what this world is made up of. And then somehow the little fractures which we carve out or enact in it, it's the source of the pain and suffering which we feel. We can call it karma, whatever. When sort of for the questions we're being asked, this thing about the projection and so on, sometimes, in a moment of stillness, or actually quite often when one is not absorbed in one's own internal thinking mind, even when leaf is sort of falling outside, it's falling in one's own consciousness and one's own awareness. The thing is there, or that flower is, that radiance is within oneself. And then, I was just, and in a way, all this, the identification of Shiva and all of that, sort of this kind of the appearance, the appearing of this love, which is just a kind of a play. I don't know what do you mean by a play here, but exactly, but it's a kind of a play which happens. It's happening all the time, everywhere, with everyone, and this is that play of love, isn't it? Every moment throughout, and it's an astounding, and coming from a kind of astounding bliss, which is what we feel if we just let our minds rest it for a moment. Anyway, let's move on.
But when we talk, that is when people talk about God's Leela, often people take the Leela to be an end in itself. The Leela is not an end in itself. The Leela is God's working towards our ultimate salvation. So God is not playing this Leela for the fun of it. He's playing the Leela for our salvation. That is the sole aim of grace.
The Leela is a fiction, isn't it? It's that story which we narrate, which unfolds as our life.
Well, it's a fiction if we think God is just playing all this for fun. But it's real if we understand God is doing all this for our ultimate good, our ultimate salvation, for the eradication of this ego that we now seem to be.
Yeah. Thank you, Michael. So the next question is, in your blog and videos, you mention about the prakriyas from classical Advaita, like Drik, Drishya, Vivek, that have the procedural way of understanding that we are not this body-mind complex, but the awareness that's aware of these things, which is the false awareness, ego. And also in verse 18 of Upadesha Saram, how Bhagwan makes it very clear that the essence of mind is ego or thought called I. I can understand this conceptually only as of now. And I also understand that till we separate all these non-conscious objects, that we mistake ourselves to be from the subject or from the one who is aware, we can't even start self-investigation. My question is, what should be the practice for someone who lacks the viveka to separate these objects from the experiencer so that the actual practice of self-awareness can be started? Basically, what practice is recommended to transition from conceptual understanding to the experience of that understanding to start the actual practice of self-attentiveness?
Right. No, there's no intermediate practice is necessary. That is, the reason for these prakriyas is to help us to distinguish ourself from everything that appears, everything else. So long as we take ourselves to be this body and mind, so long as we still, we cannot even conceptually understand, but we have the awareness that is distinct from all these things, we will not be able to practice self-investigation. If we're told, if I take myself to be this body, and I'm told to attend to myself, I can sit in front of a mirror looking at myself, or I can study books on anatomy and physiology and so on and so forth. If I take myself to the mind, I can be watching the thoughts or so many things. Without understanding that we are not any phenomenon, we're not anything that appears and disappears, we are that to which all these things appear and disappear. Even that's not the ultimate truth, but we first need to separate ourselves as awareness from all these things. So we at least we need to understand, but we are not anything that is known. Driktrisi Viveka, for example, is a very clear example. We need to distinguish ourselves as the seer from everything that is seen. Distinguish ourselves as the knower from everything that is known. Distinguish ourselves as the experiencer from everything that is experienced. Yes, this knower, seer, experiencer is ego. But in ego, lies the key to our salvation, because though as Bhagavan often called it, ego is the thought called I. What he means by the thought called I, why he calls it a thought, is because the only thing that is not a thought is pure awareness. Ego is a conflation of pure awareness and a set of adjuncts, namely these five sheaths: there's body, life, mind, intellect, and will. So these are all jada. Ego is the conflation of what is aware with what is not aware. Jada means what is not aware. Chit means what is aware. So ego is the chit jada granti, the not formed by the conflation of chit with jada, the entanglement of chit with jada. So when we first need to recognize that we as ego, the subject, the knower, the seer, the experiencer, the perceiver, are distinct from everything that we perceive. Then we can begin self-investigation, because then we turn our attention back to ourselves. And when we begin to investigate this ego, what we're investigating is not the jada element of ego, but the chit element of ego. Bhagavan says it very clearly in a passage he explains it very nicely in a passage in Maharshi's Gospel. He explains that ego is chit jada granti, and in your investigation into the source of the ahamvriti means the thought called I, the ego. In your investigation into the source of it, you take the essential chit aspect of ego. So we first need to recognize that what we are is not anything that is known, but the awareness in whose view all these things seem to exist. Once we've understood that, we are ready to start self-investigation. So the very fact that this questioner says, I can understand this conceptually, so long as you understand it conceptually, you recognize that you're not this body or mind or intellect or will or any of these things. You are the awareness in which all these things appear and disappear. So now, having understood this, what you have to do, you have to turn your attention away from all these things, back towards the awareness in which they appear. This awareness is obviously not an object, so this is a very subtle form of attention. It is, we are not attending to any object, we are attending to ourself, who now seem to be the subject. So this is self-attentiveness. But the self we are attending to is just the awareness that we actually are, rather than any of the adjuncts that we mistake ourselves to be. So this is all that is required, is just to understand. But what we essentially are is this awareness I am. Having understood this, we attend to this awareness I am. This awareness I am is the awareness of our being. This is Sat Chit, being awareness. This is what we have to attend to. This is what is shining within us as I. So the I we have to attend to is the I. At least conceptually, we need to distinguish this I from the adjuncts. Then we can begin attending to it. To the extent to which we attend to I, the adjuncts will drop off, because the adjuncts are not holding on to us. We are holding on to the adjuncts. We hold on to them by allowing our attention to go outwards. When we turn our attention back within means back towards ourself alone, we are thereby, to the extent to which we attend to ourselves, we are to that extent withdrawing our attention from other things. So we're letting go of these adjuncts. So since we're no longer holding them, they will drop off. And if we attend to ourselves keenly enough, the adjuncts will drop off entirely. We will thereby subside and merge back forever into our being, into the Sat Chit that we always actually are. The Sat Chit, which is the source from which we have risen, and into which we must finally merge back.
We can move on to the next question.
Yes.
which is about prarabdha, that is about karma. And the question is that the questioner would like to request some clarity on prarabdha's action on the mind. So my understanding is as follows. Prarabdha karma, or whatever happens to us in our life, is predetermined by destiny, both external conditions and personal. That is what our body, speech, and mind is made to do in order to achieve a predetermined outcome. If we are to become a doctor, we will become a doctor through external circumstances or conditions and individual actions of body, speech, and mind. Irrespective of our desire or will to become a doctor, though it is understood that normally our desire or will to become a doctor would likely also be present as destiny, would be set in agreement with our Vishaya vasanas, that is, our inclinations towards sense objects, for our spiritual growth. The second point, agamya karma, that is the fruits created by our will, the Vishaya vasanas. Okay. Now the question is, based on this understanding of prarabdha and agamya karma, what is included in mind, in brackets, body, speech, and mind will be made to do, close brackets, that prarabdha will act on to achieve our destiny? Does it also entail all types of emotions or feelings, some or none? I don't suppose prarabdha will make us feel in a certain way, such as liking or disliking, because that would conflict with our will, which is what creates agamya. Thank you.
Okay. It's very easy when we are trying to understand the law of karma as taught by Bhagavan, to get ourselves tied in knots, to confuse ourselves. So we need to try to keep it very simple. It is something very subtle. We cannot adequately understand it. What we need to understand is the basic principles. So prarabdha karma is the fruit of our past actions. The fruit of our past actions means experiences. Whatever we are given to experience, that is our prarabdha. Our prarabdha per se does not make us do anything. Bhagavan very carefully worded it in the first sentence of the note he wrote for his mother. He said, Avarava prarabdha prakaram, in accordance with the prarabdha of each one, Adakanavan, he who is for that refers to God or Guru, who is the one who allots for prarabdha, Adakanavan, Angangirandu, being there. That implies being in each place or being in the heart of each one of us, Artavipan, will cause to, that literally means will cause to dance. In other words, will cause to act. So there Bhagavan makes it very clear. What makes us act in certain ways is not the prarabdha itself, but it is God who makes us act in accordance with our prarabdha. When he says act in accordance with our prarabdha, in order to experience our prarabdha, certain actions are necessary on our part, actions of mind, speech, and body. Those actions will be made to do. So that is prarabdha and what God makes us do. Agamya is not the fruits created by our will exactly. Agamya is the karmas we do under the sway of our will, under the sway of our Vishaya vasanas. Those actions produce fruit, and those fruit get stored in what is called sanchita, which is just a store. Sanchita literally means a heap or pile. So it's the store of all the fruits of our past actions that we haven't yet been given to experience. From the sanchita, God selects which fruit will be most conducive to our spiritual development in each life. So the prarabdha is a selection of the fruits of our past actions, but will be most conducive to our spiritual development in this life. So the prarabdha itself is only what we are given to experience. When we are given to experience things, we have absolutely no freedom to change in any way what we are given to experience. As Bhagavan said in the second and third sentences of the note he wrote for his mother, Endrum naruvadu, envechikanum naruvadu. That means what is never to happen will not happen in spite of any amount of effort, in spite of any amount of trying. So what he implies by that is what we are destined to experience, we're going to experience. What we're not destined to experience, we're not going to experience. But we have the freedom to want to experience what we're not destined to experience, and we have the freedom to try for it. When he says envichikanam, in spite of trying or in spite of effort, he clearly implies we have the freedom to make that effort. And why do we make that effort? Because of our will. So the freedom of will and action is implied there. And the next sentence is he's saying the same thing the other way around. Nadapadu intade seyanum niladu. What is to happen will not stop in spite of any amount of obstacle. So if something is destined to happen, we can want to avoid it, we can try to avoid it, but we cannot avoid it. So from these two and when he says iduvetinum, this is certain. So from these sentences, if we think about it carefully, what we can infer from this, what is destined to happen, in other words, what we are to be given to experience is already predetermined. It cannot be changed. We cannot add to it. We cannot subtract from it. But we have freedom of will and freedom of action. In other words, we have freedom to want anything we want. We have freedom to try for it. But we have no freedom to experience it unless it is in the prarabdha. And if it's in the prarabdha, we have no freedom to avoid experiencing it. So prarabdha determines what we are to experience. Our freedom of will and action determine what we want to experience and what we try to experience. The prarabdha doesn't in any way obstruct our freedom of will and action. An analogy I often give, an example I often give is, if we are destined to be poor, we're going to be poor all our life. That's our destiny. But just because we're destined to be poor, it doesn't stop us wanting to be rich. It doesn't stop us trying to be rich. But it does stop us being rich. So we can want to be rich as much as we want. We can make as much effort as we want to be rich, but we can never be rich because it's not destined to happen. So the prarabdha to be poor doesn't stop us wanting to be rich and trying to be rich. Likewise, our wanting to be rich and trying to be rich doesn't stop the prarabdha. So actually, they're two distinct domains. Our freedom of will and action determines what we want and what we try for. Prarabdha determines what we are to experience. They're two entirely separate domains. There's no clash between them. If we understand this, this is all that is necessary. Because if we understand this, we'll understand there is no point in trying to experience something or trying to avoid experiencing something, because it's already predetermined. So using our will to try to shape our outward life is futile. The outward life is going to go on according to destiny, whether we like it or not. So if we understand that, we will understand being concerned about the outward life is futile. It's what we are destined to experience, whether wealth or poverty, health or sickness, long life or short life, peace or war, plenty of food or famine, or all these things is already predetermined. We may not like everything that we're given to experience, but we can't avoid it. we may want things, but we're not destined to experience, but we can't achieve it. So it's trying to make effort to shape our outward life is futile. The only wise use of our freedom of will and action is to turn our attention within to know what we actually are. That is the wise use of our freedom of will and action. If we're not attracted to this path of self-investigation yet, there are other alternative ways. They're not actually alternative, but they are like tributaries that will eventually lead to this main river of self-investigation. We can follow the path of bhakti, we can practice yoga, we can do this, we can do that. That's all these things are good. They're all leading in the right direction, but none of them are the direct means. Only self-investigation is the ultimate means. We all have to follow this eventually. So that is using our freedom of will and action wisely. Trying to change our outward life is futile because it's just not going to change. So there's no point in trying to change these things. It's already all predetermined. If we understand that, that's all that's necessary. The reason why Bhagavan gave so much importance to this, and why not only Bhagavan, it's there in all forms of Indian philosophy and religion, this law of karma, there's slight variation. People understand it slightly differently. Bhagavan taught it according to the Vedantic way of understanding it, which is, because it's taught by Vedanta and it's taught by Bhagavan, we accept this as the correct interpretation. Others who don't have, like the Purvamamsikas, they don't have a concept of God as the ordainer of a fruit of action. So they try to find some other way of explaining it, but it doesn't work. We need to have God to really understand the law of karma, because there has to be someone who dispenses the fruit. Actions don't give fruit by themselves. That's what Bhagavan is repudiating in the first verse of Upadeshandya, in which he says, karma giving fruit is according to the ordainment or the allotment of God. It's God who gives the fruit of the action. Karma is jada. Can karma be God? When he says, can karma is jada, can karma be God? That means what he implies there is karma cannot choose which fruit to give. If you do an action, it's not your action that decides what fruit you're going to experience in some future life. There has to be some other power, some power that is not jada. Karma is just jada. It's devoid of awareness. So it's the power of God, the power of God's grace that allots the fruit of action. But basically, this law of karma is there in all forms. It's there in Jainism, it's there in Buddhism, it's there in Sikhism, it's there in all the myriad different forms of Hinduism. The only Indian philosophy that doesn't accept karma is the Lokiatas, the materialists, the Charvakas as they're called. They're totally materialistic. They don't accept the law of karma. But I mean, their philosophy never really thrived because though nowadays materialism is a very popular view, it really doesn't, it's a very, very weak philosophy to think that we are nothing but material bodies. It's so obvious that we're something more than just material bodies. So it's never really, though there were materialists in ancient India, as a philosophy, it never really thrived. It was always on very weak grounds. All other philosophies accept this law of karma. And it's very beneficial for us if we to understand that whatever we are to experience in this life, it's already been predetermined. So we don't have to worry about these things. How we're going to pay the bills, how we're going to support our family, all these things, these trouble us. how we're going to manage in our old age when we're no longer able to work and our pension isn't going to be enough. There's so many things that may naturally worry us, but it's already predetermined. There's no benefit in concerning ourselves about these things. It's all going to happen. This is the aim of the law of karma. If we begin to ask about emotions and feelings and all these things, we're just complicating things. That is, emotion, ultimately, why do we have emotions? Emotions arise because of likes and dislikes. If something we strongly dislike happens, we have an emotion of anger or aversion or something. If something we like happen, we have a emotion of desire, of joy, of whatever. All these different things, it's all ultimately being shaped by our likes and dislikes. So the simplest way to understand it, whatever we are given to experience is prarabdha. How we respond with likes and dislikes and are emotionally affected by all these things, it's all connected with our freedom of will and action. If we surrender our will totally to God, whatever happens to us will not affect us. Of course, we can't totally surrender our will so long as we rise as ego, because the very nature of ego is to have likes and dislikes to a greater or lesser extent. So other spiritual, well, all spiritual paths aim to reduce the strength of our likes and dislikes. That is what is called purification of the mind. But our likes and dislikes, our Vishaya vasanas, these are the impurities in the mind. When these are reduced in intensity, in strength, that is what is called purification of the mind, chitta suddhi. Chitta actually means mind generally, but it also means mind, particularly in the sense of will. So it's the purification of the will. So this is the aim of all spiritual practices. But we can't be totally free of likes and dislikes, totally free of Vishaya vasanas, so long as we rise as ego. So ultimately, the only way to be completely free of likes and dislikes, the only way to surrender our will completely to the will of God is to surrender this ego. And we can surrender ego only by means of self-investigation, only by knowing what we actually are. So this is what we need to understand. Let's not try and complicate it by trying to go into it more deeply than this. We need to understand the general principles, which are very, very simple. What we are given to experience, that is prarabdha. Our freedom of will and action determines what we like to experience and what we try to experience. But that cannot change what we are destined to experience.
So the question is, I would like to clarify something about the practice of self-inquiry as taught by Ramana Maharshi. My understanding is that the instruction is to trace the I thought back to its source. When observing the mind, there are often verbal thoughts in which the word I appears explicitly. For example, I should do this, or I think that. In such cases, it seems straightforward to turn attention towards the I in that thought and inquire into its source. However, the verbal I is not present all the time. Even when there are no thoughts containing the word I, there still is an I sense, a feeling of I, or an I-ness. In those moments, when the verbal I thought is not present, is the instruction to attend to the sense of I and investigate its source in the same way.
Okay. What Bhagavan means by I thought is not just the thinking of the word I. It's not just it's not a verbal thought, let's say. It's not. I thought means ego. In Sanskrit, the term is aham vritti, which is more or less equivalent to I thought. In Tamil, Bhagavan used the term nanenam nenevu, or nanenam ennam. That means the thought called I. So the reason he referred to ego as such is that ego is not the pure I. Ego is the pure I mixed and conflated with adjuncts. The pure I is just awareness. When this is mixed and conflated with adjuncts, instead of being aware of ourselves as just I am, we're aware of ourselves as I am this person. I am doing this, I'm thinking that, I'm saying this, all these actions of mind, speech, and body, we identify as actions done by me because we experience this bundle of five sheaths, the physical form of the body, the prana, the life that animates this body, all the physiological functions and so on, the force that drives all these things. The mind, in the sense of the grosser functions of the mind, but perception, memory, thoughts, feelings, emotions, and so on. All these are what are classified as manomaya kosha, the sheath composed of mind. And subtler than that is the vijnanamaya kosha, the intellect, which is the judging, discriminating, discerning, understanding aspect of the mind. That's more subtler than all the gross things. Subtler than that is the will, the chittam, or the anandamaya kosha, the karana sarira, the causal body as it's called. This is all essentially just the vasanas. The vasanas are the inclinations that give rise to likes, dislikes, desires, attachments, and so on. So this is the will. So all these things we experience as ourself. So we think, what is the body doing? I am sitting, I am standing, I'm walking, or I'm working, I'm lifting a heavy weight, or I'm pushing something, or kicking a football, or hitting a cricket ball with a cricket bat or something. Whatever actions the body is doing, we identify as I am doing these actions. Likewise, the actions of the prana. I am breathing, for example. My heart is beating. We don't exactly say I am the heart beating, but we identify that as all part of this body which we take to be I, and its processes. The mind, it's I am seeing, I am hearing, I am smelling, I am tasting, I am touching, I am remembering, I am feeling upset, I am thinking this, I am thinking that. All these functions of the manomaya kosha we identify as I. And the functions of the vijnanamaya kosha, I understand, it's clear to me. I'm not able to understand. So on, all these, in my view, this is it is so and so. We're using our mind to judge, to understand, to discriminate, to discern. These are the functions of the intellect which we identify as I, and the functions of the will. I like this. I dislike that. I want this. I don't want that. I'm afraid of this. I like so all these we identify with all of these things, but none of these things are what we actually are, because these five sheaths are all just thoughts. The I that identifies these as itself is a mixture of the awareness and the thought, so it is itself a thought. The pure awareness is the only thing that is not a thought. So in that sense, Bhagavan refers to ego as a thought. He says ego is nothing but a thought, but it's important to understand, though ego is a thought, the thought called I, it's a thought unlike any other thought, because all other thoughts are objects. They're things known by us, whereas I is the subject. So the I thought is not an object, it's the subject. So it's very, very important to understand this, because so the verbal thought I is an object. So it's not the word I that is the I thought. It is who knows this word I, who knows anything, who knows any thought, who knows, or to whom do all these things appear. That is ego, or the thought called I. So that's the first thing to understand. Secondly, when it is said, trace the I thought back to its source, Bhagavan often explained this in this practice of self-investigation in somewhat different terms. So this, and Bhagavan did so in Tamil generally, not in English. Sometimes he would express his teachings in English, but usually not. He understood English, but he generally didn't speak English. So trace the I thought back. I don't know exactly what word it is that people have what Tamil word people have translated as trace, but I think it's slightly. I mean, for example, Bhagavan gave the analogy of a dog following the master's scent. So from that, perhaps this idea of tracing, but all the dog is doing is holding on to the scent, and the scent will definitely lead back to its master. So likewise, all we need to do is to attend to ourselves. By attending to ourselves, what we are attending to initially is ego, but we're not actually attending to ego, but to the awareness aspect of ego. So just by attending to us, that leads us back to our source. So it's not that what is at the source? The source is the pure awareness that we actually are. So if we attend to the awareness that now seems to be mixed with adjuncts, that will lead us back, metaphorically speaking, to the pure awareness that we actually are. So all we are to do is to attend to that which is aware of itself as I, namely ourself. If we attend to ourself, that is tracing the I thought back to its source. So, but however Bhagavan described it, what Atma-vichara actually is only self-attentiveness. In the 16th paragraph of Nana, he gives a very clear definition of what he means by Atma-vichara. Sadakalmum manate atma vil vaitirpatikutan Atma-vichara mendrupaya. That literally means the name Atma-vichara is only for always keeping the mind on oneself. When he said the name is for, that means this word Atma-vichara refers to this simple practice of keeping the mind on Atma, on ourself. Keeping the mind on ourself means keeping our attention on ourself. So what Bhagavan implies in that sentence is that trying to be always self-attentive, that is self-investigation, that is Atma-vichara, that is self-inquiry, if you want to call it that. So that's all we have to do. We just have to attend to ourself. Ourself means this awareness this awareness I am, this awareness that we actually are. That is what we need to attend to. The more we attend to it, the more we as ego subside. And where do we subside? We subside back into the source from which we've risen. People sometimes talk about trying to find the source, but actually the source is always clearly known to us, because the source is nothing but us, our own being, our fundamental awareness I am. There's never a moment when we don't know I am, so there's never a moment when we don't know our source. So all we need to do is to attend to this source, to keep our attention fixed on ourselves. So it's not a matter of looking for the source, but looking at the source, which is ourself. Whether we say we're looking at ego or we're looking at the source of ego, it's one and the same. Because what is the, you can use another analogy to illustrate this. What is the source from which the illusory snake appears. It's the rope. If you look at the snake, what are you actually looking at? You're looking at the rope. So looking at ego and looking at its source are one and the same thing. Because ego seems to be something separate. That is, we seem to be ego so long as we're attending to other things. But when we attend to ourselves, what we're actually attending to is our own being. So it's not that some people used to ask Bhagavan in this inquiry, who am I? Which is the I have to attend to? Do I have to attend to ego or the self? By the self, they mean what they actually are. Bhagavan would always reply, attend to ego. Why did he reply thus? Because the very fact that they ask the question mean they think there's two different I's, an ego I and a big capital S self I. There's not two I, there's only one I. When that one I is mixed and conflated with adjuncts, it's called ego. When it remains in its pure state, it's called Swarupa, which is often translated in English as the self with a capital S, but it's a rather misleading translation, because if we talk about the self, it sounds like some sort of thing other than ourself. It's just ourself. So all we need to do is to attend to the awareness that we actually are. That's all we have to do. So it's not anything to do with the word I. It's what does the word I refer to? It refers to my being, to this fundamental awareness of my own being. I am. That is what the word I refers to. That is what we should attend to. If someone says, think of an apple, we don't just think of the word apple, we think of what the word apple refers to, which is a fruit that grows on a tree and that we can buy in the supermarket or in the bazaar or wherever. So when we're told to attend to I, it doesn't mean attend to the word I, but what the word I refers to, which is our own being. That is what we are to attend to. Attending to our own being, that is, can be explained in terms of tracing ego back to its source. Why is it tracing ego back to its source? Because to the extent to which we attend to ourselves, we as ego thereby subside, and where we subside is back into the source from which we've risen, namely our own being. So I hope this is a clear answer. I don't know if the person who asked this question is here. If you're here, was this a satisfactory answer to your question?
Yes, Michael, very, very clear. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Okay, good.
So the question is, does it mean that whatsoever we see is that we are in a real mix with vasanas? Even the people, good and bad, are we alone? I'm not very sure I know what this question means.
So I think I get an inkling of what it means. That is, in a dream, we see many people. We see ourselves as a person and we see many other people. All those other people are as real as the person we seem to be. But actually, who is the one who is experiencing the dream? It seems to be the person that we seem to be in the dream, because we seem to be that person. But actually what is experiencing that dream is not the person, but the I that is aware of itself as I am this person. The person is jada, devoid of awareness. But there's an I that is aware of itself as I am this person. And that I is what is experiencing the dream. And that I is also what has projected the dream. But we seem to be a part of our projection because we identify ourselves with a person in our dream. So long as we're dreaming, we're not alone. There are so many other people there. If we are in a state of, if we're emotionally upset about something, we can go and talk to any of our friends in a dream and they'll console us and everything. So long as we're dreaming, we seem to be one among many. Only when we wake up do we recognize that all those many people we saw in a dream, including the person we seem to be in the dream, all were just our own mental a projection of our own mind. In other words, a projection of our own vasanas. Likewise, according to Bhagavan, all this world is just a projection of our own vasanas. But so long as we experience ourselves as this person, every other person seems to be a self just like us, seems to be another ego, another one perceiving the world. So we don't feel we're alone in this world. Well, hopefully we don't feel alone. I mean, there are some people who, for one reason or another, have no friends or anything, but most of us have friends or family or loved ones, or so we're not. But even if we feel alone, we are never actually alone, because our own reality, which is God, which is Bhagavan, is always with us. That God or Bhagavan is nothing other than ourself as we actually are. But so long as we have limited ourselves with this person, Bhagavan seems to be our companion, our guide, the one who is taking care of us, our savior, our beloved father, mother, our mother, father, God, and Guru, they say. He's all of these things. He's everything to us. So even if we find ourselves in a situation in life where we seem to be alone, where there seems to be no one else who cares for us at all, we can always be assured that His infinite love is always with us, always caring for us. So we're never really alone. But when we realize, when we know ourselves as we actually are, we will know, in a sense, that we're alone. But there won't be any feeling of loneliness, because we will experience ourselves as the one infinite whole, other than which nothing exists. In that sense, we'll be alone. But it won't be a lonely state. It'll be a state of, because a lonely state is a state where we feel something is lacking. Whereas that is the state of purnatvam, of fullness. So there'll be nothing lacking in that state. I don't know if that was an adequate answer to that question, but I hope it was.
I think that's, yeah, there was one question, which sort of is brief, which is simply, is it correct to say that devout bhakti yogis can also experience the benefit of grace?
Definitely. That's what bhakti is all about. The very fact that whatever bhakti we have, whatever love we have to follow any spiritual path, that is grace itself. So it's not that we get grace by bhakti, it's by grace that we get bhakti. That is, bhakti is the love. Well, it begins with the love for God, as if God was something other than ourselves. But it matures ultimately in love to God as our own being. But in whatever form bhakti manifests, it is grace alone that is manifesting in us in the form of that bhakti. Without grace, there will be no bhakti. There'll be no love to know ourselves as we actually are. There'll be no love to surrender ourselves to God. It's all the working of grace.